and think in terms of what you can offer, make sure you come, and also we will be having a talent or less than completely talented show. Some of us who are going to perform are definitely less than talented, but we're going to do it anyhow. So think about what you'd like to do to join us. Oh, and one more announcement that's not in the order of services. Tremaine brought oranges. They are for you to take with you. And they're in the bag.
Out of place, but these are from Farragut High School. They sell oranges for money for the band, and I have eaten a whole box of those in the last 3 weeks, and they are delicious. I was not even asked to say that.
I don't know if you could all hear that. That was a testimonial, a heartfelt testimonial about the quality of the oranges. Okay. Our chalice reading for tonight. Oh, did I miss something?
Yeah, I think she's saying that.
Oh, there's an opening reading.
I'm gonna throw in a few extra words. I'm gonna throw in a few extra words. Good evening, everyone. It's awesome to see you all here this evening. I am, if I haven't met you yet, I'm Reverend Carol Beddoe, and I'm privileged to serve here as minister. And so I'm gonna just read a little reading by Howard Thurman about Christmas time. Because this evening we're going to have a little bit of a history lesson. We're going to be talking about the context of the history of Jesus and his life. And so this is what Howard Thurman, who was a great preacher, said. When the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flock, that's when the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among the brothers, and to make music in the heart. So this evening, that's the sort of theme we're going to be thinking about. We're going to be thinking about this time of year as a time to heal the world.
Our chalice lighting is a poem by William Carlos Williams called Winter Trees. All the complicated details of the attiring and the disattiring are completed. A liquid moon moves gently among the long branches. Thus, having prepared their buds against a sure winter, the wise trees stand sleeping in the cold. And that is where we start tonight. We have, as always, 2 candles. In addition, candle of concern. My candle of concern is, as much as we as a nation are struggling with democracy, David reminded me the other night of how many places have so much more problem even approaching it. It's hard. People find it hard to be democratic. Here, South America, Africa, Asia, Europe, people find it hard.
And Suzanne will light a second candle, a candle of celebration. This is a policy, a tradition we've started to do recently. There's so many things to worry about. We need to spend half the time celebrating. And I know how schmaltzy it sounds, but I was thinking what to celebrate. And you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Today is the first day of the rest of our lives. It really is. Talking with a couple of friends of mine before the service, I made a New Year's resolution. I'm going to spend time playing every day, starting January 1st. Doesn't mean we won't spend time working, but be sure to spend time playing as well. And so this is a time of celebration. We are together thinking about how each of us individually will begin a new life, and how all of us collectively as a community will begin good life. So that's something to truly celebrate.
Thank you, David and Suzanne. So if you look in your order of service, it says that the choir is going to be singing a special piece of music. However, as you will notice in the room, there tend to be a few viruses going around town, and half of the choir is sick. So y'all are going to get to sing with us. So if you are, you don't have to stand up, there will be no standing up. You can sit calmly where you are. If you would join us though, and open up those great hymnals to number 256. This is a song we don't typically sing at Christmas time. It is a Christmas song, but it's a song about the context of the winter. It's called Winter Night. And we're going to sing all three verses to set the stage for the kind of, setting that this amazing person, Jesus of Nazareth, was born into. Winter tends to be a time when it's a little bit hard to be cheerful sometimes. So this song is about the kind of gloomy darkness of winter. So I invite you to remain seated, but if you happen to know this song, and we are small but mighty tonight, please sing loudly. So that song isn't a traditional holiday one, is it? I'm guessing some of you have never heard it before. And yet it does capture something important about the Christmas season, a message that the birth of Jesus of Nazareth came into a world that needed something that people were longing for. Winter night is cold and dark. The world is weary with its cares and troubles. We might translate that in our modern days like we're exhausted and really glad school is out for Christmas break, or that we get a week off of work. We know from our own vantage point now, what the parents of that amazing, beautiful child didn't know, that his life would go down in history as being about relieving the struggles and suffering of humanity. And that's partly why this beautiful story of the birth of Jesus is so important to us today. Because his life shows us that a bright light, one shining spirit, can make a difference in a troubled world. The world that Jesus was born into wasn't so very different from our own. Of course, the technologies were different, but people are people. In his time, there were intense and difficult political divisions in the land. There were economic hardships and inequalities. People were suffering and struggling to eke out an existence. Let's paint a picture, maybe, of the history of the world that Jesus was born into. So here's a little background for those of you who like timelines. 1,000 years before Jesus was born, a king named David had conquered Jerusalem. And his son Solomon had built the first big Jewish temple there. Now, this was about 1,000 years before Jesus' birth, so about 3,000 and some years ago. Wars over this land had been going on for a long time, and they continued. Wars with the Assyrians and the Babylonians. About 600 years before Jesus was born, the Babylonians took over, and that temple that Solomon had built was destroyed. And in the process, the people who built it, the Jewish people, were exiled. They were kicked out of the land. And still there was war going on. 50 years later, the Persians came in and they took over. And a couple of decades after that, they allowed the Jewish people to come back. And they allowed them to rebuild that temple. That is called the Second Temple. Soon thereafter, about 330 years before Jesus was born, Alexander the Great came in, and he was Greek, and he conquered much of the Middle East and Africa, including what we now call Judea, the Holy Land. But Alexander the Great was a young man who was in a lot of political activity, and he died only a few years after his conquest. And when that happened, his kingdom was divided into four. Four of his main generals divided the land up. Now, the two that we hear about most around the time of Jesus' life, leading up to it, was the group that was led by Ptolemy. He was in Egypt, and the Seleucus family. They're called the Seleucids in Syria. And we hear about them in these stories. And this is also the time, because Alexander happened to be Greek, that the scriptures about these earlier scriptures were actually translated into Greek. The Ptolemies and the Seleucids took turns ruling Jerusalem and the surrounding area until about 60 years before Jesus was born. So imagine that. Imagine that you are maybe 30 or 40 years old, and maybe you have grandparents, or you have children. It's within the lifespan of a person that we're talking about now, just before Jesus' birth. 60 years. The Romans conquered Jerusalem. A general named Pompey conquered Jerusalem. So imagine this. This is a land where Jesus was going to be born. A land in constant conflict. War and tumult and strife. The rulers were constantly changing. The rules were constantly changing. The economy was constantly changing. And that's the general history of this place where this story that we're going to talk about tonight takes place. So let's sing just one verse of the song, O Little Town of Bethlehem. Bethlehem 246. Imagine in your mind that Bethlehem is a town in the middle of this land where all of these changes and conflicts have been taking place. about that line for a minute. When we sing that song at Christmas time, but do you ever think about what the hopes and fears of all the years were about? That's an important line in this popular song. It reminds us that Jesus was born to be a great hope for a weary people who had been struggling and suffering for a long time, many generations of uncertainty. Now, his birth, because this had been going on for a long time, there had been centuries of prophecies about him coming. There were prophecies that he would come. There were prophecies that another would come before him. And this had been going on for hundreds of years. One of the important prophecies that happened right around this time was that there would be another child whose name would be John the Baptist ultimately, who would come just before Jesus. John the Baptist's mother was a kinswoman to Mary, who was the mother of Jesus. And both women received messages from angels about the children that they would bring into the world. Prophecies that are really important to the story. Now, one thing that's important to remember about a prophet is that a prophet in those days was a little bit different than what we mean now when we say the word. That was actually a formal social role. It was actually a job description. Think about that for a minute. Can you imagine being assigned to be the prophet? What if I came to you and I said, this week, Ellen, you will be the prophet, and you will have to make the prophecies. In that day, it didn't just mean having a miraculous vision. It also meant sort of being the speaker for God. And one of the prophecies that comes right before Jesus' birth is given by Zechariah, not Zechariah, Zechariah, who was the father of John the Baptist. Now, Zechariah was from a family that descended from King David. Remember I said 1,000 years in the past, King David had conquered Jerusalem? Zechariah's family were descendants of King David, and they, with some other families, were responsible for taking care of the temple. And Zechariah received a prophecy from an angel while engaged in these duties.
Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth were without children, despite having wished for them for many years. One day, as he performed the formal duties of tending to the temple, he was told by an angel that they would have a son, who would be the herald for the Savior soon to be born. Zechariah was filled with the Holy Spirit and gave a prophecy about these events. And this are the words of his prophecy as recorded in Luke, the 1st chapter, verses 70 through 79. Holy prophets from of old have foretold that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all those who hate us, to show the mercy promised to our fathers and to remember God's holy covenant, the oath that he swore to our father Abraham to grant us that we, being delivered from the hands of our enemies, might serve him without fear, in holiness and righteousness before him all our days. And you, child, will be called the prophet of the Most High, for you will go before the Lord to prepare his ways, to give knowledge of salvation to his people in the forgiveness of their sins, because of the tender mercy of our God, whereby the sunrise shall visit us from on high, to give light to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace.
Isn't that interesting that the prophecy isn't about people celebrating a big holiday? It isn't a prophecy about Christmas cookies or treats or parties. Those were already happening at this time of year, actually, in those days. The Romans celebrated a holiday called Saturnalia. But what they tell us is that they're waiting for someone to deliver them from enemies and struggles, that we'll be able to live without fear, that the sunrise will come and light will shine to those who feel like they're in darkness. So Luke also tells us that 6 months after Elizabeth, so this is Mary, Jesus' mother Mary, her kinswoman. Sometimes she's called a cousin, but the word in Hebrew doesn't necessarily specifically mean cousin, it just means kinswoman. 6 months after Elizabeth became pregnant, the angel Gabriel came to Mary to give her own message from God. Gabriel said to her that she would bear a son who would be a great man, called the Son of the Most High. He would rule on the throne of his ancestor David, and his kingdom would never end. So remember, if Elizabeth and her family, and these are descendants of David, so are Mary, her kinswoman. Both of these prophesied sons, John the Baptist and Jesus then, were to bring peace to a weary world, peace in a time and place where strife and injustice and inequality had been going on for a really long time. Now remember, at that time, Rome was in charge, and a man by the name of Herod the Great was the assigned Jewish client king. He was called a client king of Judea, under the auspices of Augustus Caesar, the high Roman ruler who controlled the land. So you have Augustus Caesar ruling all of the Roman lands, and Herod, who happened to be Jewish, was in charge of the region where Jesus was to be born. Caesar allowed the Jews to practice their religion and to pay taxes to the temple in Jerusalem. So in other words, Elizabeth and Zechariah and Mary and Joseph were subject to the Roman Empire, and they were under the direct rule of a king who was sort of under Caesar's control by the name of Herod.
Now we pick up Luke 2, verses 1 through 7. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration and was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. All went to their own towns to be registered, and Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was descended from the house and family of David. He went to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged, and who was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for her to deliver her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in bands of cloth, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place at the inn.
So now, while Caesar Augustus seems to have been a relatively kind ruler to the Jewish people, Herod has a little bit less great reputation. He was kind of power hungry and a little bit ruthless in trying to get rid of anyone that threatened his control of the land. So it's in this context that the Magi, those three kings, are sent to find Jesus. And here's the thing about the Magi. The Magi were from a religious group known as Zoroastrians. And the Zoroastrians actually were astrologers and numerologists. So they had a certain religion that involved a lot of checking out the stars and doing math. So it is in this context that the Magi come.
Continuing the story, Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born, King of the Jews? For we observed his star in the east and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him, and calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to be shepherd of my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me the word so that I may also go and pay him homage."
Now we know from the next part of the story that Herod, well, he didn't really want to go pay homage to the child. The child was prophesied to be the new ruler of the land, and Herod wasn't very happy about that. He wanted to make sure that the child never was able to take over the land. But as the story goes, the family had help.
This comes from Matthew, the 2nd chapter, verses 9 through 12. When they heard the king, that's they being the Magi, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen in the east, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then opening their treasure chest, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road.
And so we see even from the beginning of Jesus' life that he's meant to be a savior to his people, but that he's going to need help, and that there's going to have to be a little bit of magic to make it work out. We know that he would face the sorts of struggles known to humans of all times: war, poverty, injustice, all kinds of struggles that we all have, and yet the light of his life was going to provide a healing balm in the darkness and brighten the spirits of humanity through all time.
Matthew 2, 13 through 15, the escape to Egypt. Now after the Magi had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod.
So Herod died about 30 years after Jesus did, but after Jesus was born. But the legacies of their lives remains until this day. Generations of people have told this story for 2,000 years. Think about it for a minute. Why do we tell this story over and over and over again? In Unitarian Universalism, many of us are not explicitly Christians. Some of us are, many of us are not. So we don't necessarily tell the story for the same reason that it's told in some other traditions. And yet we tell the story because it's a story of darkness and light. It's a story about a soul so bright, a person so brave, that he came to a weary, struggling world, was courageous and strong, told the truth, fought for justice, and made a difference for all of time. Now, in the early 1800s, so a long time after Jesus was born, a Unitarian minister from Massachusetts named Edmund Sears composed a poem about this fact, that this story means something to us all the way so much later. He composed a poem that became one of our most popular Christmas carols called "It Came Upon a Midnight Clear." And David's going to read the original words to that hymn before we sing the words that are in our hymnal. The original words are a little different, and our hymnal's a little bit different yet. He's going to read them. They describe a time when another Unitarian congregation, not so different from our own, thought that the story of this person's birth was relevant. In his case, the time period he was talking about was the 1840s, between the Mexican-American War and the American Civil War, which was another time of strife and division in this country.
It came upon the midnight clear, that glorious song of old, from angels bending near the earth to touch their harps of gold. Peace on the earth, goodwill to men, from heaven's all gracious King. The world in solemn stillness lay to hear the angels sing. Still through the cloven skies they come with peaceful wings unfurled, and still their heavenly music floats o'er all the wearied world. Above its sad and lonely plains, they bend on hovering wing, and ever o'er its babel sounds the blessed angels sing. O ye beneath life's crushing load, whose forms are bending low, who toil along the climbing way, with painful steps and slow. Look now, for glad and golden hours come swiftly on the wing. Go rest beside the weary road and hear the angels sing. For lo, the days are hastening on by prophets seen of old, when the ever-circling years shall come the time foretold, when the new heaven and earth shall own the Prince of Peace their King, and the whole world send back the song which now the angels sing.
So, we're going to sing all of the verses that are in your hymnal for number 244. And notice that, again, this has been adapted even from that time period, because we keep adapting these stories over and over to help us find inspiration and hope and to feel that promise of new birth and the promise of a new possibility each year. So the story carries us through the centuries, reminding us that the bright light of hope can shine in times of fear and uncertainty, that the good news of birth and promise can bring light into the darkness and peace into strife. So I invite you all just to take a minute and think about what makes you happy about Christmas. What brings you joy at Christmas time? What is it that you celebrate the most? I know that for me, it's something about being with my family, with being with people I care about, remembering things that are really important, time, celebrating, sharing. Those are things that can bring us light and joy, no matter what kind of struggles or weariness the world is bringing us. So we're going to sing together one more song that's a traditional Christmas song. It's number 245 in your hymnal, Joy to the World. And we are going to sing verses 1 through 3 in that. I will warn those of you that read music that we have chosen to drop it down a little bit lower so you don't have to sing those super, super high notes. You can be joyful about that. The choir requested a lower version of Joy to the World. So we're going to sing all 3 verses, and notice that the words are different than what are traditionally sung. If you've sung this song a lot, maybe throughout your life, you'll notice that the words that have been written in our hymnal are adapted for us as well. So we're going to sing all 3 verses. So one of the things we do to help us make sure that we're making the world a better place, that we're being light in the world, one of the things we do is try to make sure that we are sharing our time, our energy, our talent, our gifts. For those of you who may be with us virtually, we actually have a QR code that you can use to make a donation to this congregation. We've been announcing for a few weeks that what we're doing tonight is what we always do on Christmas Eve. We actually take a donation, and what it funds is our minister's discretionary fund. And what that does is it allows me, as the minister of this congregation, to assist people in need. So if someone is struggling to pay their electric bill, or if someone needs help with food, or if someone has some kind of an emergency, the money that's in this discretionary fund allows me to go out and serve in the community and help people. So we're going to take a donation. I'm going to play that Joy to the World song one more time while the ushers pass those plates around. If you'd like to make a contribution to that, it will be gratefully accepted. And then also, in a minute, I'm going to tell you about some other opportunities you'll have, other ways that you can do some good work in the world. So Westside is always working to find ways to make a difference in the world. And not everyone has financial resources necessarily available to them, but there are so many ways we can make a difference in the world. We will have some new justice and generosity projects coming up in the beginning of 2024. For those of you who have been here before, happen to know some of our members who are not able to attend in person, Elizabeth, can you raise your hand? Elizabeth in the back of the room, for those of you who are physically here in person, has some more cards that we can sign. We send cards to people who have maybe been with us in the past, or who are just physically not able to attend anymore. We continue to collect resources for a couple of programs in the community. So the two programs that we've been supporting consistently are Family Promise. Thank you to everyone who contributed to the Christmas gifts for the Family Promise family. Elizabeth, have those been delivered?
Yes.
Awesome. Our gifts, I gotta tell you folks, the office was filled to the brim with gifts for our Family Promise family that we supported. And also my car is currently filled to the brim with shoes that you all have donated for Samantha Monday's program, where we support people coming out of incarceration, returning into sober living. There will be new projects coming in the spring. So one of the things that we want to all remember is that we are all a light in the world. You don't have to do very much to be a light to someone else in the world. If you make a Christmas cookie today, you are guaranteed to be the light in someone's world. If you shared a smile with someone at the grocery store, I went into Kroger yesterday because I was crazy and I forgot something. And I went into Kroger and people were so nice. Everyone was in the holiday spirit. Everyone was being so kind. You know, I was warned, oh my gosh, don't go into Kroger, and then, oh, that's a bad idea. And everyone was wonderful. Everyone was smiling, everyone was happy, everyone was polite. It was awesome. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could do that in July or September? It doesn't take much to be the light in someone else's world. We don't all have to be as big a figure as Jesus of Nazareth. We can simply be the light to a friend, a family member, even a pet. I know that this morning my dog was laying by the fire and she rolled over and she showed me her tummy and said, "Mommy, please rub my tummy." And I guarantee you that that was the biggest thing she got all day long. And it made me really happy too. So let's remember to be the light for each other in the world. So as is the case in many congregations, we will be lighting candles as a symbolic reminder of this, that we are the light of hope and promise and peace, that we can carry these in our hearts and that we can carry them into the world. So we're going to sing Silent Night. You don't need to look at the words. Most of you are going to, or hum, just hum. We're only going to sing the first verse. We're only going to sing the words that everybody already knows. Jerry, could you dim the lights for us a little bit? What we're going to do is we're going to sing this and we're going to look at the light that we are able to create in the world. Also, you'll be glad to know that we've chosen a lower version of this one too. So just look around you for a moment. It's amazing to notice. Let me get a candle too here. Let me light one. It's amazing to see how stunningly beautiful something as simple as lit candles can be. And you know what? Notice that it doesn't matter if there's 3 people or 30 people or 300 people in a room. Isn't it funny that around the world, congregations of every size do this ritual on this night? And it's because it symbolizes something so important. Each one of us is a light in the world. Each one of us has the capacity to bring light into the darkness. Even one candle in a dark room illuminates. So let us all go into this sacred time of the Christmas season, carrying it not just tomorrow and not just through New Year's, but all the way into the coming year. Remember this image of the light and know that you can carry it even when you don't have the candle, even when it's sunny out. Your smile is a light unto the world. Your kind word is a light unto the world. Your courage, your optimism in the face of someone else feeling down, these are all a light in the world. May we all go into the world carrying this light. Jerry's going to bring the lights back up for us so that we can celebrate together. I know that there are cookies back there. So before you blow your light out, just notice that even with the lights up, they still look pretty cool. Merry Christmas, everyone. Have a wonderful night.